So, hi everybody, and welcome to People, Pain and Performance. It's a chat about something we all deal with, whether we want to admit it or not. So, in recruitment and leadership, we talk about performance, productivity, people problems. But underneath all that, there's often pain. That could be tension, stress, burnout, or just that sense of being stretched too thin. So today I'm joined by Ben, a professional pain management coach, to explore what pain can actually teach us. So not just about our bodies, but how we manage people and ourselves at work. So Ben, it's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. It's a privilege to be here.
Oh, did you want to just sort of elaborate on who you are and what you do, a brief intro so that people who possibly haven't met you yet can understand a little more about you?
Yeah, certainly. My name's Ben Mitchell. I run a coaching practice which goes by the name of Your Life Matters, and ultimately I work exclusively with people living with chronic pain. So my pain is born from, unfortunately, personal experience. I've lived with a chronic condition for over 13 years. So I know how bloody hard it can be to wake up every day with certainly, difficult pain, but often,
Yeah.
debilitating and crippling pain. And so I work on the psychological mindset of people that, can't go and see a physio and osteopath chiropractor because those interventions have been done and you can't help. And so yeah, I help people, you know, have belief and hope that better days lay ahead. And I know certainly from my own personal experience that you can live a life on your terms rather than constantly on your bodies and on your pain.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. So, we're going to jump straight in with what is pain. So, when we hear the word pain, we think injuries or illness, but you look at it more broadly. How do you define pain, Ben?
It's a great question. And I don't think there's one straightforward answer. But ultimately, the way I look at it is pain is basically your body's alarm system. It's normally a signal that something needs attention, whether that be physical, emotional, or psychological. I think what's really hard for people to understand is that two people can have the same condition and feel completely different levels of pain because pain is ultimately processed by your brain and not the tissue or ligament that's been damaged or that is what feels in pain. So I think that's why it's so personal. And only really the person living with the pain can really describe what it feels like. Um, Pain's ultimately a
Absolutely.
protective mechanism. It's your brain, it's hardwired to try and keep you safe. And I think just because you can't necessarily see your condition on a scan or because someone looks fine, I don't think it makes it feel any less real. In my experience, pain is always valid, always individual, and is always worth listening to. Um, and I think it's just important to show the two differentiations. So you've got acute pain, which is pretty much everyone would have experienced at some time, whether that be an injury, a broken bone, maybe a bee sting, swelling, whatever that may be. But it's acute because ultimately, over a period of days, maybe weeks max, it fixes itself and you become pain free. And then there's chronic long term pain, which is defined as pain that's lasted for 12 weeks or more, or longer than the original injury has taken time to heal. So they're your
Mm.
kind of two differences. And ultimately, I work predominantly with people with chronic long term pain that's 24/7.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think it's, a lot of people when they're looking at, pain in the workforce, let's say, they'll look and say, well, it's, early warning signs are coming in, and often people ignore those. They just keep pushing through. Oh, I feel under the weather, and they keep going. Or oh, do you know what? My mental health isn't particularly great, or I'm under a lot of stress or pressure, or whatever that might be from work or a boss or family life. It covers all sectors, but we kind of push through ignoring early warning signs and then something breaks. So often in my world I hear about it and I think the similarity is it's a professional version of a pulled muscle. So why do you think so many of us kind of really push through without listening to our body or our minds?
So I've got personal experience of this in my early days. So I've had my condition for just under 14 years. And I remember
Yeah,
the early days, and I think, well, rather, I should say, I think sadly, I think it's still the same. And I think most people still fear that judgment of admitting the pain, perhaps because they're not going to be believed. Because, like my condition, and like so many people with chronic conditions, it is invisible. Um, and I think by admitting the pain and the levels of pain that you're in might show as a weakness. And so many people will just continue to battle on. Um, and look at it in some ways that they're trying to save their job, as if somehow the alternative is that if you shout about your pain, that equals loss of job.
yeah,
So I do still think that um, there's that kind of just belief to just fight it through and it will go away.
yeah.
Um,
The
and I
stigma that's
think,
often attached.
yeah, absolutely. And I
Yeah,
think just doing what I've done for the last 2 years, I've become, acutely aware that I think chronic pain is still so underrepresented and still not talked about in any way, shape, or form like it should. And I think that might be another contributing factor as to why many people just try to ignore it as if it's either not valid or real.
yeah, absolutely, Ben. I think you're so right there. I've been a recruiter for over 20 years, and you're the first pain coach I've ever met. So
Mm.
that says it all. You think of the
Yeah,
the number of people I've spoken to. So the fact that I think it's underrepresented, completely correct. I think businesses have maybe started. There was that movement of mental health first aiders, and now people are jumping on the menopause hot topic. Even though the menopause has obviously been around as
yeah,
long as women have. But it's weird, isn't it? How these comes in sort of ebbs and flows, and businesses kind of almost feel like a checkbox exercise. And they're like, oh, well, we need some mental health first aiders. Who wants to go on that? It's, who
yeah,
wants to learn about the menopause and support people? But
yeah,
I think they could do, businesses could do an awful lot more. And we all could as individuals, but we could all do a lot more to learn about pain and how that manifests in our colleagues or our friends or our family members. And I think just reaching out and learning how we can support them more.
yeah.
Um, you know,
I
I
couldn't
think
agree more. Yeah,
it's important, right?
absolutely. Yeah,
Being good people.
yeah, yeah,
Oh dear. So I suppose a nice segue onto the next part is, managing pressures or pain and people, because if you're looking after a team, managers can often feel that constant pressure. They're juggling performance, commercial performance, and team well-being, and then their own workload, and their own lives and performance. So what can leaders or people managers learn from pain management about spotting stress early before it kind of, really develops into that burnout, do you think?
yeah. So yeah, you've just alluded to what I was going to start with, where I think that I think pain management does teach us the value of catching small signals, signs early. So something that I've often said and I like to say is pain often starts as a whisper before it becomes a scream. And I don't think that's any different to how stress and burnout shows up in the workplace, whether that be dips in energy, I think changes in communication, drops in performance. I think leaders that tune into those early signals can respond with support, clarity before that pressure turns into burnout. And I think the lesson can be quite simple, which is you don't wait for a crisis, notice the early signs and try and intervene early. Um, and remembering that, just speaking to your team with openness, honesty, and never judge. And I know back in my time in the corporate world, those days where my manager actually listened to me and kind of met me with empathy went such a long way because I didn't feel like I had to just keep justifying and explaining. She just got it. And she could tell by my mannerisms, by my voice, ironically, that I was struggling. But that's because she took the time to really take the time to listen and actually care about someone on her team. And so
Amazing.
it's never rocket science, this stuff. It's all usually quite simple. And yet it's amazing how often we just get down into or we don't get into the weeds and we just can't see the wood from the trees and we just carry on in our worlds without realizing what's, almost punching us in the face, if you like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
God, I suppose that level of, emotional intelligence, from people leaders, I suppose, is really important. And self-awareness, how are they supporting you? But also, are they in a good place to be helping you? Are they dealing with their own version of pain? Um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, it feels like a kind of a cycle. It feels very, very cyclical. And again, it's, I suppose, for local businesses here in BCP, or even the wider sector, people like yourselves are phenomenal, because you're able to come in and really identify with those individuals and really help and guide them through, okay, what
Mm.
could our process look like? Where are we struggling at the moment? Who's struggling? Because I guarantee half the people that are genuinely struggling probably aren't saying anything. So,
100%, they won't. No.
uh,
And again, it goes back to the original question of fear of maybe being judged. I used to
yeah,
think, well, if I admit how bad my pain is and the
yeah,
condition that I'm now going to live with for the rest of my life, is this business going to say, oh, blimey, how are we going to manage Ben out? Because this is going to either cost us a lot of money in ergonomics,
yeah,
and special, time off dispensation. And is it, am I ultimately going to be able to perform at the levels that the business demands, needs, and expects?
yeah,
And there's that continual playoff. And ultimately, I left my role because I didn't feel that my body could keep up with the demands, because the pain just became all consuming. And it's sad that we work in a world like that, but ultimately there is that complete push and pull and trade-off of and you can see why people don't often, unless it becomes untenable, why they don't reach out, because not every employer, unfortunately, is that understanding.
yeah. You're so right. You're so right. I mean, for me, what I often hear from people is the link of performance without burnout. Because again, you've hit the nail on the head there. There are certain roles where, it's expected that you are able to turn up and do your job. And I think a big one of that is anybody that is commercially driven. So if you're, within sales, or, marketing, it's something
Yeah.
that is a real revenue generator, that you're constantly having to go, go, go. There are no dips. There's no quiet time. There's no rest or recomp. It's just constant go, go, go. So I think
Mm.
performance without burnout is something that's really quite key for me. I mean, my industry is rife with it. How I've been doing this for 20 years, I've hit burnout a couple of times, and it's absolutely debilitating. So, you know, what would you say, or how can people keep performing without tipping into pain or burnout? What would you say their sort of, good habits might look like, or, some really practical tips for them, Ben?
So yeah, this is kind of right up my street, because this is generally what I normally coach people through.
Also, I feel
Um,
like we're getting some practical tips ahead of time. I love this.
yeah, yeah. So there's a few. So I think you've got to ultimately listen to your body, and you've got to be comfortable in reframing rest, gentle movement as a priority in your day, as you would, or rather, as you the same way you would as a work or personal deadline. So you've got to be comfortable with trusting that actually your body knows what's best, and you need to listen to it. Um, so that's definitely massively important. And ultimately, you've got to be consistent. And every kind of approach I'm on now mention is really key. That consistency is key, because ultimately, chronic conditions, chronic pain, it will be with you certainly for the foreseeable. So remaining consistent is absolutely key. Um, Something that's had a massively profound impact on me, and I know I've written about it quite a lot on my socials, is learning to be kind to yourself.
Ah,
Um, and an example for me that took a while, but I'm now absolutely okay with it, is that almost every day I'll need at least an hour, normally around kind of mid-afternoon, where I do nothing. And that could be just lying on my bed with my eyes closed. It can be gentle movement, or it could just be sitting on my own. And that's normally because my body is screaming by kind of 2, 3 o'clock. It's ready for a rest.
yeah,
Now, if I put my shoes, or sorry, if I put my hat on, in terms of I'm still only 44, and for the last 14 years, I've kind of needed to do that And for a long time, I pushed it away. But it's so hard to lie there when you're trying to set up a business or you've got a busy job and try and justify it as if it's not weakness, you're not lazy and you're not useless. Because they're all the things that you're telling yourself. Like, I should be doing more. Why am I just doing nothing for an hour? And so I now am kind to myself. I know that when I take that hour, hour and a half, however long I need, I can confront the rest of the day. And I'm ultimately lowering my odds of having a flare up by trying to push through. So now I completely reframe it and see it as a sign of strength that I'm able to accept my reality. So that's been massively important. Um, and then lastly, I think of pain management. And I really like the analogy that I came up with, which is a car. So bear with me. So if you think for most cars to run, they need
Yeah.
four inflated tires, they need a steering wheel, and they need an engine, or most cars now a battery. So you've got kind of your six components. So now I think of whether it be pain management or just well-being as six main pillars. So you've got sleep, nutrition, exercise, the connections you have, your environment, and your mindset. Now, if you link each one of them to a part of the car, if you're, for example, eating really well and you're going to the gym or you're doing your exercise, but you sleep for 2 or 3 hours a day, that sleep is like having no steering wheel or having one flat tire. Your car is not going to go, or if it is, it's going to go really slowly. And so, what you need to try and do, and it doesn't have to be huge things every day or every week, but just every day be conscious of trying to do one of the six pillars and have them all in unison so that your car does run smoothly. So for me, that's been vital. So now I don't just look at my nutrition, my diet, my exercise. I actually really prioritize my sleep. I make sure I'm only connected and hanging around with people that I actually genuinely want to speak to. So no one's bringing me down. I'm working on my mindset. Obviously, a lot of that's through the coaching. And so I really like that. And I know the clients I work with do. So I think there's just two or three things that can kind of get you started if you are
Yeah.
really struggling and need that kind of support.
I love that. It feels like, people should reach out to you, Ben, for their MOT. It's just that is what I feel that
Absolutely.
you're that you're offering people. We've come up with a whole new service for you. But you're so right. And I think in a world where, we're on socials, right? All of us are, whether we want to be or not, doom scrolling. And I think one of the big things I found when starting my own business was looking at entrepreneurs, right? Now we're all a great bunch because we've braved it and we're going alone and all of those things, which is wonderful. But how guilty am I left feeling when it's oh, I'm up at the 5 a.m. club and I'm like, I'm not up at 5 a.m. Absolutely not. Please don't speak to me pre 8:30 unless I've had a lot of coffee. Oh, I've run 10K this morning. And I'm like, not all of us are geared that way, right? Like for some of us, it's just I need a slow, gentle morning. And so I think it's really lovely that you're breaking it down and saying, look, there are lots of different components. You don't need to be an ultra marathon runner in order to be successful or to manage your pain or your business. It's little increments, but of everything. And I really love that message because I feel like that's just more manageable.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, we're all in danger of listening to podcasts and inspirational people that can do everything. And then I know this is slightly off script, but I have my concerns around, what's the definition of an entrepreneur? And you touched on it there, or success.
Yeah,
That you wake up at 5 a.m., you do 18 hours. Now,
yeah,
I consider myself as on top of my pain. I've spent a lot of time really studying how I can get the best out of me and my body. But with the best will in the world, my body won't let me do 18 hours a day, and it won't let me do a lot of the things that we consider as success.
mm,
So for someone living in pain, that mindset is unbelievably difficult to get your head around because
yeah,
you listen to people that are giving these tips because they're able-bodied and they don't struggle every minute of every day.
yeah.
And so that's a really big adjustment and almost feels like another conversation itself, how you can kind of navigate that. But yeah, just acceptance of the body you've got. It might not be perfect, you might not be happy with it. I wish I didn't have my condition, but you can make the best of whatever it is. You just need to know how to. And everything I ever work with my clients on, or I talk to you about now, or anything, is all done through experience. I've failed a lot, but I've also kind of done things that have really helped me, and that's all I ever try and do, is just support through the things that have really aided and helped me, because my journey is still ongoing and probably will be for the rest of my life. I just feel that I'm better equipped than some others that perhaps are just starting on their journey of pain. So yeah.
Amazing. So away from cars and MOTs and and entrepreneurs at 5 a.m. and maybe bringing it back to the people side of things, because you and I, obviously, we met at networking, and we talk about a lot about how there are a lot of synergies actually between what I do in recruitment and being a talent partner, and you as a pain management coach. So when I talk about people pain, that my clients are experiencing, so I'm often meaning, those tricky team dynamics, or there's conflict, or, there's a large amount of turnover or attrition and, breakdown in communications. But actually, we've done this before, I think, where we've talked about the parallels between how physical pain can build, but then how that also impacts a team, and the team pain can build. So
Mm.
do you see those parallels with, some of the clients that you're talking to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in any scenario, my experience would tell me not to ignore the kind of small signals and confront them before they turn out to be bigger, which
Yeah.
unfortunately they always almost do. I think, just like physical pain, the earlier you notice and address the discomfort, the easier it is to resolve.
Mm.
In my time in different roles, I've seen teams thrive when the leaders treat kind of small signals as almost like invitations to like lean in and listen, and
Yeah.
then kind of action before they become something, a whole lot bigger and more
Oh my gosh,
difficult
yes.
to solve. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's definitely
Prevention
parallels.
being better than cure, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
the amount of times, that we all speak to people, whether it's, someone says, oh, I've got a cough or a cold, and you're quick, take this, start to feel better. So that type of prevention. Obviously with you, it's different because you've got a longer term, pain that you're dealing with, and condition that you're dealing with. But, especially for clients, if you like, we always say, look, prevention's better than cure. Can you do anything to keep your people rather than just recruiting and replacing them, or,
Mhm.
just working with them to try and retain? And I loved what you said there about the leaning in and listening. So for people leaders, when they're looking at being really preventative, is that something that you can offer? So, instead of thinking, okay, I'm a excuse me, I'm a people manager and I've got somebody on my team that's in chronic pain, maybe there's somebody that has really good emotional intelligence, and they've realized a member of their team is struggling. They don't really know how to deal with it. They're part of maybe a smaller business that doesn't have that big corporate funding. They don't have mental health first aiders. Are
Yeah.
you able to kind of, have one-to-one sessions with that people manager and say, look, these are some practical tips, here's how I can help you? Are you able to kind of guide managers through that side as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I'm honest, I don't get that kind of, probably because I don't promote myself like that. I normally go after the person that's in pain. But
Yeah.
absolutely, even when I was in pain, I was still a manager. So I still had, and developed those skills. Obviously, I was far better at it than someone who wasn't living in pain, because I can absolutely spot those signs a mile off. But yeah, no, absolutely, because it is difficult. And sometimes, you're not always going to get a colleague that wants to potentially share everything
Yeah.
with you, and they will kind of hold it in. But I think the more you open and allow yourself to be, honest, and as long as you just keep asking those questions and having those check-ins as a habit, you're very likely to get more out of the individuals. It's generally when you know that, and I've had it, we've all had managers that we would call, not great or poor or whatever, that you just think there's no point in telling you and really opening up, because either you just don't care or you just don't get it and you won't take the time to get it. Um, and so, yeah, it's a two-way street, but absolutely, yeah, having conversations with managers that may or leaders that may have, those scenarios play out is, yeah, I can absolutely support people like that.
Amazing. That's wonderful to hear. So, Ben, look, this has been brilliant. You and I could gas bag all day, and I think we actually probably could. But, I think hopefully through our audience, they'll have learned something about how pain, whether that's, physical or people related, can actually be a teacher and not just a problem. It is an opportunity, as you say, to lean in, to listen, to see how we can help our team members improve their lives. Because ultimately, if people are feeling better, even if they're dealing with something long term, if they're feeling better or they know how to approach it or they've got tools, in their tool belt that are really going to help them, then
Mm.
commercially they're better for your business as well. So everybody wins from that. It's not just a selfish, businesses trying to get more money out of us or blood from a stone. It generally does help people to have a really healthy, robust, well informed and well supported workforce. So yeah, for anyone listening, if that's made you think about your own work pain or just stop and think, then I see that as a really good sign, because as Ben has clearly said, to pause, notice and act early, your body and your team will thank you for it. So thank you ever so much, Ben. Honestly, it's been amazing to learn a little bit more about you.
No, I've really enjoyed it. And I think just lastly, one takeaway that if a leader or manager is listening and wants to take something away, I would just say try and make check-ins a habit, not with your teams necessarily, although obviously you need to, but
Yeah,
do it on yourself. And I've written down three questions that you could ask yourself throughout the day just to keep yourself going, which is you could ask yourself, how's your energy? What's your current stress level? And what do you need to do to feel better? And if you just take a reflective step back and ask yourself those three questions throughout the day, you'll be
yeah.
amazed at how effective it can be.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's the magic hat trick right there, isn't it? Those three feel, because I think it guides you for everything. Yeah, they're
Yeah,
great. I'll
yeah.
also put those. I'll put those on the link below so that people can really just take those away as a separate. So they can maybe print them off and put them on their desk on a post-it note and really just check in with themselves. That's brilliant. Ben, thank you so much. Take care.
No, thank you.